Hi, Good News family. We say a lot around here that we all have a story, but one of the things I keep asking myself is, are we willing to really tell it? I think some of us, we shy away from our stories. Either we think it's way too big of a story, too spicy maybe. Others think it's too boring because you've been following Jesus your whole life, which I think is an incredible story to tell. But we just want to start sharing our stories, learning how to share the good news of Jesus through our life, because it's not about us. It's not about our story. It's his story, and he is the focus of the story. So we're not celebrating sin or celebrating regrets. We're celebrating what God has done and the transformation in our lives. So for our very first podcast, I have invited one of my very good friends, Rafael, to join us. Thanks, Pastor Rafael.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I want to say you showed up here 23, we talked about this, 23 years ago?
Yes.
Barely saved, just a baby in your faith. And then now you've been a pastor here for how long?
13 years.
13.
Yep.
So it took you 10 years to figure it out?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. 10 years running away, I will say.
Okay.
From the call.
From the call.
Yes.
Yeah. Figuring out that, you wanted Jesus, you needed to live for him, but being a pastor.
Yeah.
How many pastors, I'm serious, who have said, I'll follow you, Jesus, but don't ask me to be a pastor. Or I have friends who've said, and don't ask me to be a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Don't ever say never.
Yeah. That's, if you don't want the Lord to send you to do something, then don't say you won't do it.
It's true.
Oh, don't call me to do that.
It's
right?
true, yeah.
So.
Okay, so in the framework of this podcast, I'm just going to throw questions at you. You just talk. This is super casual, nothing formal. Tell me how you first ended up in a church. Like, was your family religious growing up? What was that like? And then how'd you end up in church?
Yeah. So my family was religious in the sense that I grew up Catholic, and so went to mass, as a kid, was baptized in the Catholic Church as a baby, and it was a very traumatic story, I guess, because my dad had been saying that the priest is going to make a soup with me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so I was not a baby, so obviously I was like a toddler, and I could understand and see things, and so we got to the church, and it was this big, one of these big, huge Catholic churches with all the statues and the things, and it had a huge altar, and in the middle of the altar there was this big basin, and it was metal, and it was sitting there, and it had water in it, and the priest is sitting behind it. I'm like, oh, they're gonna cook me. I was trying to run away from that place.
Wow. Well, okay, well, hold on. Why weren't you baptized as a baby? Were they just not practicing at that time? So
I don't even know the answer to that question. I knew that my sisters were baptized really, really young, as babies, but I wasn't, so I don't remember why. I don't know why.
Where are you in the birth order?
First.
You're the oldest?
The oldest.
Okay.
Firstborn, yeah.
Okay, so you got baptized in the Catholic Church. Do you guys, are you attending Mass regularly? Are you raised in, any practice of religion at home? What's that like?
No, not really. My mom was always the one that practiced, I would say, religion, woman of prayer, always. But it wasn't something like we went to church every week or Mass every week. Went during holidays, obviously, and things like that. But yeah.
So you were born in the Dominican. You lived there until you were how old?
13 to 14 years old. Yeah.
And then what?
Then moved to New York City. That's where my mom's side of the family lived at, and so.
What prompted your family to move from the DR to New York City then?
Well, I would say it was my mom and dad looking ahead, if you will. So we were doing fine in DR, and dad held some really good positions in the government, So it's not like here, it's not like in America to where, you have elected officials in certain positions. You can't just fire somebody just because you want to. In DR, and in a lot of third world countries, it's like, if you're the president, you come in and you get all your friends and family and people, and you put them in high-ranking roles in the government. And then if you're out of there after 4 years, then there's a clean sweep. Yeah. Okay. So
So was your dad just in government in that way, like for a 4-year term?
No, he was a lot longer than that. So he had, he has some great opportunities and good relationships and things. And but he started to see kind of like the decline in the economy and in the country, and thinking ahead, like if we have an opportunity to go to the United States and actually for the future of the kids, he thought that would be best. So that's where we ended up in New York.
So you end up in New York City. I know parts of New York City, but I'm thinking the stories I've heard, it's a slightly different version of New York City than where you grew up.
Right. So, it's not the glamour that you see in the movies and the downtown, the
Times Square,
Times
Rockefeller
Square.
Center.
Yeah, exactly. Like all of the beautiful places. I did work at the Statue of Liberty as a teenager for years, and so that was a cool experience. But yeah, so in New York, it was really, really different, obviously, than in DR. Mom and dad both worked a lot, 2 jobs each. And so that meant that as a very young teenager, I was by myself a lot and left to my own devices, if you will, and, hanging out with friends. And then from there, started getting into things that, young people shouldn't be getting into. And, the older I got, the more I felt like I knew it all and nobody can tell me what to do. And basically that's how I lived my life in that season. And my parents did not know much about my life and were not really involved in that sense, just again, because to make it there, you have to really, grind and work hard. And my grandmother and uncle, that they lived in the 6th floor. We lived in the 2nd floor, and so my sister spent a lot of time at my grandmother's, and so yeah.
So then, where does church, like even the practice of faith of any kind, how do you get there? How do you?
Yeah. So, and in New York, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like in New York, we're not going to church at all. And I think I only remember in New York one time going to a mass. And so how we got there to church was then I moved here. It was because of a relationship, and she was moving here, and we met in high school. She was moving here. Her family was living here, and they had a business, and I came to help them move. And basically, we're thinking, okay, well, our relationship is over. But they actually invited me to move with them. And I mean, I came here and it was summer and all the things that, taking you places and seeing, man, this is a different life. Like everything's so clean, and you go to the pool and you have all these opportunities here and things. I was shockingly surprised how things were so cheap here. I was like, this is like, you can have an apartment and, and it can have air conditioner, because in New York you struggle in the inner city, you struggle with that. And so you can have air conditioner, you have a pool, you have a workout area, you could even get a garage for your car, for crying out loud. I mean, so it was really enticing. And obviously, I was like, well, if she's moving here, I want to stay with her. And they put out this offer, so I ended up coming here. And
did all your friends in the city, did they think you were crazy?
Yes. So they were like, you moving where?
Yeah,
Alaska?
moves to Nebraska.
Like, the only guys that actually knew were those that follow college football. And so they knew about Nebraska football. Yep. But the majority was like, where? Alaska? What? No, not Alaska, Nebraska. And they were like, wow, like, what are you going to do there? Like, do they have
own cows?
Do they have cars and things? Like, you're going to become a farmer? Like, that was the perspective and the perception in New York. So ended up here, and then, just that relationship did not work. Things did not end up well, and then it happened where my family gave their life to Jesus. So I was the first one to move this way. And then I talked to my parents and it's like, hey, I think that it's time, just like you guys left DR to go to New York for a better future, I think is a much better future for the girls, my sisters, if we move to Nebraska.
Yeah.
And so convinced them to doing that.
How long had you been here by the time they moved here?
Just about a year,
Okay.
I would say.
Yeah.
Well, when Dad came, because he first moved here, and kind of get things situated and things like that, and then and then they followed sometime after that. But my youngest sister, was still in high school. She actually finished. She actually did senior year here.
That's a big change.
In Nebraska, yeah. And so yeah, and then after all of that happened, my family gave their life to the Lord, and it was very shocking to me because it's not the religion that I knew from the past. This was like all in, what I would consider to be fanatical, if you will. And now we don't do this, now we don't do that, now we don't do this. And I was like, well, this is kind of like a cult. And so, not kind of, is a cult. That's what I thought. And then they obviously then began the process of trying to convert me. And I was having no part of it.
I was going to say, how'd you take to that?
Yeah, I was having no part of that. I did not want to become that person. And plus, in my mind, I had a lot to lose because I couldn't live my life, and I was having fun living my life.
I had a thought too of sometimes we feel like if we would just make a big move and we'll just get a fresh start. And I have yet, I mean, this is just an off the cuff thought, but I have yet to really see how a fresh start, the percentages of a fresh start actually helping you start over and be different? Or do you just gravitate to the same people, the same lifestyle until there is a major paradigm shift in how I'm going to live? I'm just going to draw the same people.
Exactly. Listen, you attract who you are.
Yeah.
And you are attracted to the things that you're attracted to. And so that's a great point. Like, living New York City, I left one environment that at times was not healthy for me to get into another environment that on the outside looked much healthier, but it became unhealthy for me. Actually more unhealthy because at this time now, I was an adult, if you will. I was a young adult.
How old are you?
Making my own money, 21 years old, and I could make my own decisions, do whatever I want. I have my own place, and therefore, and it was in that season. It was 21 when I first moved here, but then it was several years before my family surrendered their lives to the Lord, and that is the truth. You can't take you out of the equation, and you can try to change the environment, but you gravitate to the same people, to the same things that and to the same dysfunction, if you will.
Yeah. So what happens in your life that gets you to a point of decision?
Yeah, I think that it was a process. It was a long process of realizing that there were things that I thought were going to bring fulfillment, right? So whether there was the addictions that I had that I have given myself over to, women, more money, getting higher paying jobs, or possessions, if you will. Like slowly but surely, I began to feel like this only satisfies for a little bit. Like it only satisfies for a time, and then I feel empty again. I feel like there's no satisfaction in life, if you will. And it really changed for me when my brother, William, who is, we're brothers from my dad's side, he ended up moving here because was like he has to come out to Nebraska as well. And he ended up moving here, and he was my partner in crime here in Nebraska when he moved. Like, with the drinking together and all of the stuff that we did it together. And he was like my big bodyguard because it's a lot bigger than I am.
Is he older than you?
No,
Okay.
actually, it's another story.
I just realized by that question.
A few months ago,
Yeah.
a few months that separated each other, but
Yep.
but then he gave his life to Jesus, and he was like radically transformed. Like, he no longer drinks, no longer want to go out party, do stuff, and I'm like, what? So like, I did not understand that, and he was the one that was hard after me and trying to, quote unquote, preach the gospel. And I'm like, bro, I don't need to hear you. I don't need to talk to you. He said something, and I think I shared this with our Good News family in the past, but one time I went to pick him up at work, and he wasn't driving yet here in Nebraska. And we actually both, because at that time, at that time I had separated from my ex, and I was in my parents' basement, and he was there. And so I went and pick him up at work, and we're driving, and he turns down my music, and I'm like, bro, you don't touch another man's radio. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I just want to tell you something. I said, man, William, if you're going to talk to me about Jesus again, I was like, you could save it. I don't want to hear it.
I was going to ask you, like, did you just get irritated?
Yeah, I was very defensive.
Yeah.
Like, I did not want to have any FaceTime with them because it was like, that's all they talked about. Again, I was like, this is a cult. Like, I don't know how you could get brainwashed like this. And so it was a Friday. I remember that it was a Friday because I was looking forward. I wanted to pick him up, and I'm looking forward to the weekend because we start what we do on Fridays. And he said, no. I just want to talk to you about something. And if you listen to me, I promise I'm not going to talk to you about this again. And I was like, okay, are you for real? And he's like, yeah, just if you give me a moment, and I'm going to say some things to you, and then we don't have to talk about this ever again. I said, oh, amazing. Okay, bet, let's do it. And so he told me, he says, he's like, I've been talking to you about the Lord, and you've seen the change in my life, and blah, 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 and all this. And I'm like, wow. But then there was something that he said towards the end. We're almost getting to the house. I remember exactly where I was driving. And he said, because I can't tell you much of what he said before this. He says, I see the way that you're living your life. And he says, and this life is going to bring destruction to you. And he says, but I much rather see destruction in your life with Jesus in your heart than the way that you're living now. And he was very specific. He says, I much rather see you in a wheelchair or in a hospital bed.
Whoa.
But with Jesus and the help of Christ in your life than to see the way that you're living now.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm getting chills even now because that was my response. Wow. I was like, what? I was like, so I said, I was mad, obviously, pulled on the driveway. And I'm like, so that's what you got to say? And he's like, yeah, that's all I got to say. So you're not going to talk to me about this ever again, right? Because that's your word. And he said, yep, I'm not going to say anything again. And I said, okay, fine. Turned off the vehicle, got inside. I was mad. I was fuming because I'm like, I went and we went inside and I'm showering and I get out and I'm like, I can't believe he's my brother. He's supposed to have my back and he wants harm to come my way. Yeah. Like, I'm like, this makes no sense whatsoever. I'm like, so then I say, yo, why did you say this? And he says, I told you I'm not going to talk. I said, no, we're going to talk now. It's like, you don't. And he's like, nope, I told you that I'm not going to talk to you about this anymore. And, I remember before he said that, he says, God has been touching you. I don't understand this. Something like God has been touching you with his left hand, but I sense that he's going to touch you with the right hand. And I'm like, left hand, right hand. Like, what are you talking to me about? And so he was talking about the wrath of God, because he's like, they're people praying for you. Way too many people praying for you. Like, you're going to surrender one way or another. And so, and then he was not talking to me. I was so mad, Tonna. I was capital P, don't know. Again, like you and I have a conversation. Sometimes I don't know what are adequate words to say or not. But
in English and
yes, like translated and what's acceptable in the culture.
You were ticked.
Yeah, I was very, very ticked. And so after I get dressed and I'm obviously ready for the night and everything else, I get in my car and I'm peeling out. I'm like driving recklessly because I'm like, I cannot believe, like I was so angry. And then he would not talk to me.
Yeah.
He would not talk to me about this. And it's something that I didn't understand at all. And so that's how we began. And I would try to, I'd be like, hey, William, we're going here. You want to come? Nope. I'm like, the dude would not even go to play pool with us because we're drinking.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is totally a cult. Like it's something has happened. And so, but then I could see the fruit of his life. And then I could see how happy he seemed to be. He was not having to deal with hangovers and, you know, being mad and drama or things. And it just...
Or looking over your shoulder.
Right. And so like, it just became this me quietly observing his life and how now he was a different person. And I'm like, what did this cult do with my brother? Like, I don't know who this man is. And so, then they were all got really involved and in you know, in the Catholic Church. They were all in Catholic Church still, but it's like the charismatic side of movement within the Catholic Church. And so like they have prayer meetings in garages and in people's homes, and like my sisters and my brother and some others started like a youth group and all that. And I mean, there were a lot of young people going, and so they were going to this conference in LA. And so, I had no desire, but that was like, hey, we're going to be driving to LA, this group of young people, you know, and like young adults were coming. And he was like, I need your help. And I was, you need my help with what? And he's like, okay, I need your help driving because I don't trust anybody else to go and drive. And I was like, nah, Dad, I'm not interested. He's like, come on, you know, you don't have to worry about anything. We'll pay for everything and whatever. And I was like, I don't know. Then I started talking to some guys at work, and I was like, my family's going to LA. So a lot of the dudes I worked with come from LA. And they were like, oh man, that's awesome. You never been to Cali, you know? And they're giving me contact informations of their family members, and like, man, you could go out there, you're going to have a blast, and you know, and you're going to have a great time. So just, man, you got an opportunity to go, just go with them. And so I was like, And then I started thinking, well, this is be awesome. Yeah. Like I go over there with my family. I have a hotel room and everything that's paid for, and I could just go do my thing. And I was like, yeah. So I told Dad, I said, hey, man, you know, I'll go with you guys and help drive. And so that's how I got to LA with them for this conference that they were going to. And so Friday, we got there. I don't remember if it was Thursday late night, or was it Friday, one of those days. But get there. And it was so late. We get into a hotel. Then the next morning, they were going to breakfast, and it was by the Staples. It was at the Staples Center, but it was by there, and they were going to breakfast. Like, hey, you want to go to breakfast and whatever with us? And obviously, we'll pay. We got you. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So we went to breakfast, and then after that, that's when they were going to the conference. And so when they tell me, hey, let's go here, you know, and I'm like, the Staples Center, that's what, you know, the Lakers play and all that. And so I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. And I'm like, why so early? So it's like they were starting in the morning. So it's like this conference is starting. And I was like, man, I'm not interested. I don't know that I want to go. And they're like, man, what are you going to do now? So my brother again, he's like, what are you going to do? It's morning. It's out here. Like, and it's like, yeah, that's true. So I'm like, all right, I go hang out with a little bit. So they're like, I just go in there and listen. There's going to be some music and whatever. So I get there. I was like, nah, man, I'm just going to go to the hotel. But then, you know, God will use whatever. So there was some honeys walking in there. I'm looking,
Hilarious.
and I'm like,
got you to say yes to the Staples Center.
Yes. So then I see these droves of ladies walking in, and I'm like, bro, what is this? Some sort of beauty pageant? And I'm like, yeah, William, I think I hang out with you guys for a little bit. So we went inside, and went in there, the music started. I'm like, this people, like the whole place looked like they were really into this, like all brainwashed. And but the speaker that came that day, I mean, tailor-made for where I was at.
Do you remember
And
who it was?
I don't remember his name at all. All I remember is that he came from gangs in L.A. And then gave his life to Jesus, became an LAPD officer, and was part of the gang unit and was rescuing young men and women from the gangs in LA and sharing the gospel with them. And it was remarkable. Like everything that he was saying was so specific to my situation. He even talked about, man, like, you know, he was speaking about, and again, I'm talking now, you know, 24 plus years ago, and it's like, he was like, you've tried to fill your life with all these different things, right? And it's like, tell me how that has worked. Have you felt like that's been lasting? Do you feel like you have to go from one thing to feel that, you know, that to feel the need that you have, that internal need? And it was me, like constantly, I always try to find something else because this wasn't satisfying enough. And, you know, and that's why relationships were not working, because I was looking, well, maybe a woman is going to satisfy me. Well, that never happened. And it's like, you know, well, whether it's more money or whether it's this car, whether there's this, this substance, if you will. And but he was saying all of these things, and he was like, you know, you're going to die looking for that thing that's going to satisfy. And I was like, oh my goodness, how does this guy know so much of my life? Like, he was just, you know, I hear people saying like, man, you know, you were speaking directly to me. And I'm like, that's something that we say and hear a lot in church, but it is so true. Why? Because it is the Spirit of God who is speaking through a vessel. That was just, it seemed to me that I was the only person in this whole auditorium full of young adults. And then he asked God to, he didn't use the words that we now use, like come into your heart or whatever. He talked about, you know, God wants to transform you, and he wants you to surrender his life. And at that point, I knew that I had an issue with my heart. And I'm talking about heart, not as in a physical heart, but the place where your emotions and your desires flow from. And so that's what I asked the Lord. I said, okay, if you're real, if this is true, then change my heart, and I'll serve you for the rest of my life. Those were my words. I didn't do a prayer. You know, I was just like, if this is real, then you change me inside, and then I'll know. And this is the one and only time in my walk with Jesus that I had an experience like this. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I literally felt the pain in my chest, like literally like somebody has stabbed me in the chest and then was twisting it. So I'm standing next to my brother. Everybody is now, at this point, everybody's hands raised and they're singing and stuff. And I'm here hyperventilating, and I feel like I'm going to die. Like, and I'm grabbing my chest, and I get on my knees and I'm trying to grab my brother, and he's just tapping me in the shoulder. And I'm like,
you're like, no, dude, this is for real.
And so, I mean, obviously I'm like, you know, in my mid-20s, and I don't know, I've never had a heart attack. Like, I don't know, but this sure feels like it. And I'm trying to get William's attention, and he's not paying attention to me. And all of a sudden, I just feel the pain leave me, but then I couldn't stop crying. I just start tears. And again, where I come from, men don't cry.
No.
You don't ever let them see you sweat. It's survival of the fittest. And so I just couldn't stop crying. And I just weeping and crying. And now I'm there, and then my brother puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's over there doing what I don't know what it was at the time, but I know it's worshiping. And And then the speaker comes back up, and then he starts, speaking again about, you've been transformed and God has, and I felt so different at that point. Nobody told me you're saved. Nobody told me now you're a child of God. I got up from that floor, and that was in the morning session. We stayed there until almost 10 o'clock that night.
Wow.
And even the honeys looked different afterwards. Like, it was just so different. And it was an experience that I'll never forget, obviously. And we went to the hotel late that night, and we're like, oh, let's go. They didn't call it debrief, but let's go talk. We were gonna meet in my sister's room to all of us get together and kind of talk a little bit about what happened. And then there was too many of us, so I ended up going to the lobby. But I remember when I went to shower that night. So I had diamond earrings, and they were pretty big. And
Can you bring those back? Will you wear them on Sunday?
Yeah, sure. I think I still could open the holes, but so, and they were, there were diamond studs on each side, and they were pretty big, and I was proud of them. It cost me a lot of money, and right, that's all you live for what others think of you. And so I remember that night looking at myself after I showered, and I had those things in, and I looked at myself like, that's not me. And I don't know, like, nobody told me any of this. Like, I looked at myself like, that's not me anymore. So I took them off, put them on the bathroom counter. And then we did our thing, went to bed. So the next morning, we're going to the morning session. So we get up, and they celebrated what happened in my life, and they were trying to tell me what all happened. But I was like, my head was spinning. And so went to the next morning, get up, brush teeth, all that stuff that grown-ups should do, right? And so I shower again, come out, and then after I get dressed, I see the earrings there. And I'm like, I grabbed them, put them on my pocket, not even knowing anything. The speaker that morning, then when he gets done, he has a call, and he says, there are many of you here that have something on you that represents the all you.
No way.
Exactly.
I've never heard this part of the story.
Well, but
Smoke.
so they, because I mean, sometimes I forget what I've shared or what I haven't. But he's like, you have things that represent who you used to be, who you're no longer this person, and all this stuff, and you surrender your life to Christ. And they make this. I mean, it's not a tunnel, but it's like a line of people lining up this main,
Like walkway?
walkway.
Because
right.
you're in the stadium, right?
Yeah,
Staples Center.
yeah. So we're
you got to go down.
Yeah, so and I don't know if it was in the main Staples Center stadium, like but they line up this walkway. People on those sides clapping, celebrating and stuff, and people are walking down, and they got these baskets that people are throwing stuff in there. And, they're, I'm like, I don't have anything. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I pull those out. And I was like, oh, these cost me a lot of money. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not this person anymore. So I start walking down there, and I'm telling you, then the tears start flowing again. And I'm like, what is going on? So walking all the way towards the altar, people are clapping, excited, and all this stuff. And I mean, you get there, firearms were there.
Wow.
Drugs are in there. Condoms are in there.
Wow.
Like little shots of, of whiskey and bourbon. And they're like, it's all these different things that people would just drop in those baskets. And so I dropped them, came back, and that was my first time experiencing what true worship in my life was and what it will become. And got back, they're singing, doing stuff, and I just raised my hands. And the rest was history. I was never the same after that, and it was the experience of a lifetime, I would say. And then I came back, and Victoria and I were in a relationship already.
Hold on. I want to back up just a little bit
Yep.
because you have this monumental moment in LA and you've got a few days and then you got a couple days of driving back home. And are you processing what's going on in your brain of like, what is this going to look like now? This is before cell phones, whatever. So you're not like texting your buddies back home. They don't have any idea what's happening unless you've called somebody. But
Yeah, no, but we actually have cell phones because there's a part in that story that I have cell phone, but not really. Texting wasn't a big deal like it is now.
okay. You had a flip phone?
Yep, I had a flip phone. And, but yeah, so the processing on the way back, all I was processing at that time is I can't go back to the same things I was. And so, number one, I got to break up with Victoria. That was we have to break up, and I can't do the things.
How long had you been dating her? Ish.
So that happened I'm thinking, I don't remember, honestly. I think it might have been because it was after 2001. We got married in 2002. So I think we have been dating for close to a year now.
Okay. So this is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
This isn't like some fling that just started. This is
Oh,
a big
no.
deal. She's
No, like
serious.
we had gotten really, really close at this point. I was spending a lot of time with her.
Did you tell her? Had you called her and told her?
No.
You hadn't told her anything had happened
She
yet?
had no idea. And like, yeah, like it was, I mean, yeah. When I came back, that was my whole thing driving back. Like how am I going to do this? And because so all I keep thinking about was I said to God, if you change my heart, I serve you for the rest of my life. And for me to keep that word, I have to stop the relationships that I had before this moment.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's how I was processing that.
So then you get home, and do you break up with Victoria, or how does that go down?
Yeah, so get home, I call her, I say, hey, I got to talk to you. And she's like, oh, okay. I said, I have some things to say to you. She comes over. My parents live in a cul-de-sac, and my vehicle was in the driveway. She pulled in. I was in my car. She comes in, sits in there, and then I tell her, hey, I gave my life to Jesus, and I'm going to live for him, and we have to stop this. She's like, stop what? Like, yeah, we can't be together. And she's like, why not? And I was like, I just told you, I gave my life to Jesus. Like, what does Jesus have to do with this? Like, she didn't understand. And obviously it's like, okay, so and I said, well, I can't live the way that we've been living. The things that we do and the things that we have been doing, it's not what and again, like, this is not something that somebody told me. It's just, I don't know if now I could say, well, it was the Spirit of God moving inside of me and leading the way.
Yeah.
At that time, I had no idea. I just had a huge conviction that I had to stop. And so she did not understand it. And she was telling me, she's like, I want to be really mad at you, but I feel like I can't. Like, I could see it in your face that you're different. And she's like, and I don't know how to say it. And I was like, well, I feel different. And she, obviously, she was devastated. She didn't understand it. And she walked out of the car and was walking to her car. And again, I broke down again because I'm like, I don't want to do this. God, I don't want to do this. This is not right. Like, I felt like, I crushed her. And which these were things that did not affect me in the past. Like, this is just now a new person having feelings about hurting somebody that I have never had prior to that. Yeah. Like, it just, and then I remember getting in front of my car. I was driving that Mitsubishi Eclipse, and I was in front of it, and I got on my knees, and that's why the cell phone thing. I say, God, is she supposed to leave? Please give me a sign. And she calls me right then. And I'm like, oh, I think that might have been my first prophetic, experience. Because I had the flip phone, and it was a Samsung that at the time was like, the, young people listening to this probably, or Adam who's right here, will be like, what? This was the thing? Like, it was a flip phone. It was the first color screen, the Samsung, and it had actually a window. So when you had it closed, it displayed the name of the person, right? So she's calling me, and when I look, it said Victoria. And I'm like, so is this the sign? So I open it up, and she's like, I know you told me that, like it's over, but I just can't leave. I can't find myself to leave. I just can't leave. And I'm like, okay, I'll be right there. So I walk to her car, and I get in there, and she's like, I just don't understand. And I don't remember all the words, but I just remember, without knowing, I just said, well, for us to stay together, you have to change. And she says, I'm willing to do whatever. And I'm like, but it's not for me, it's for God. She's like, yeah, fine.
Right. Yeah. You, God, it's just mere semantics. Whatever.
Yeah. And so, so she's like, yeah. And so I said, but we can't do the stuff that we used to do. And she's like, no, I understand. And like, so anyway, we're talking through this, and I'm thinking, okay, well, all right then. And she's like, will you come home with me? And I said, no, I'm not going with you. And she's like, oh, okay. Well, anyway, that conversation ended. She left. And then sometime later, she calls me. And this was her new birth date, if you will. So she calls me, and she says, I don't know who to get a hold of. I've been calling, and I don't want to share her story, but I called my friends. Nobody's answering the phone. And I call you. And I said, what's happening? Because she sounded kind of frantic. And so I said, what's happening? She's like, I'm in the bathroom of my apartment. And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, I may have tried to maybe take some pills or something. And she dropped I guess the bottle of pills fell on the ground. And she was just like, she wanted to call somebody. And that I'm not wanting to call me, but called me. And so I'm like, stay right there. And then I'm talking to my sister, Emma, who's there, and mom, and dad. And they're like, we're going there. And then it was so weird, because she would be like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, no, I'm talking to you. No, you're talking to somebody. Don't tell anybody about this. Like, and I'm like, no, I'm not telling anybody. She's like, is anybody going to come here? Like, I don't want you to come here. And like, so it was like almost like like, I need help, but then other part of her is like, I don't want you to be here. And so it was kind of like that spiritual battle, if you will. And we hopped on the car. I'm on the phone with her. Dad is driving. We're driving now to where she lived, where it's now very sexy and trendy. Is it Blackwood area? Blackstone area or whatever. Yeah. It was a little more hood back in those days around there. And so she lived around there, and in a house turned apartments. And then she's like, oh, what do I do? So I got her to leave the apartment. I said, get in your car and start driving. And it's okay. Just, I'm going to talk to you just until you calm down. And so we're talking, and she's like, but you're not coming here. I'm like, no. That was my first lie as a believer, by the way. And we're coming down. And I was like, where are you at right now? So she would tell me where she's positioned. I'm like, oh, okay, go back to your apartment. I think you're coming down. So she pulled into her apartment, and we blocked her in. So we pulled right behind her. And then mom gets out of the car. And Victoria will tell me this, because it's the first words that she heard mom saying this way. That she told her when she opened the door, and Victoria looked at her and started crying. And Victoria and mom hugged her and said, I'm your mom now. And people don't know Victoria's story, but she lost her mom when her mom was like 42 years old, and to cancer. And so Victoria started weeping. And we went to her apartment, and that's the day I got baptized with the Holy Spirit. Wow. With just mom started praying in Spanish, Emma translating. We're at her apartment. All I remember, I'm down on the floor speaking in tongues nonstop, and I couldn't stop. And I mean, the presence of God was so strong in that apartment. And Victoria's crying, and mom is leading her to Jesus, and she asked the Lord to forgive her, and she surrendered her life to him. And, you know, and through mom, my sister interpreting, Victoria gives her life to the Lord, and the rest is history. We walk out of there, and then so she surrendered her life to the Lord a couple of days after me.
So great.
Yeah.
Then you guys got married maybe a year later?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We got married a year later, and is just retelling this story is reminded me of how God is in the details. So many times we say those things and don't really realize that just little things that if this one thing would have gone just an inch this way, this wouldn't have happened.
Yep.
I mean, I was truly, truly determined to end our relationship, and I did. And so but now looking back at it, it's like, that was the wrong approach. The Lord wanted Victoria saved and restored, and you know, the family that we now have. So anyway, just God works.
It's so cool to think about all the little details that are actually really big details, because they're eternal details that affected, I mean, even decisions we've made with wrong motives. Like, sure, Dad, I'll drive the vans to LA, you know, those kind of things, that God is big enough that he knows what he's doing. Even when we are, maybe to use something from scripture, would spit in God's face. You know, we're like, I'm going to LA. I want nothing to do with him.
Right.
I'm basically spitting in his face, but he knows exactly what he's doing. And he's kind of like, well, you just wait and see, son. I got this. And just thinking of how I have known much of your story, and I've known you only while you've followed the Lord. Like, it's kind of hard to even picture you being anybody who doesn't follow Jesus. And I'm sure you think the same about me.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But if it's what I want people to capture in the value of telling their story, is because people are out there who don't know God yet, who are lost. And your parents were saved, your sisters were saved, your brother was saved, and your brother didn't back down. And he said some pretty hardcore things, and then put his own relationship with you at risk of, like, we might be done here. He might have severed things, but he knew that he had to pursue you and tell you the truth. And so he's willing even to use his own story to then change your life story. And I just think, have you ever been embarrassed to tell your story or ashamed of it? And if, you know, depending on your answer, then how have you seen God use your story now, because you do talk about it?
Yeah. I think that now I'm not ashamed to tell my story. And now I don't tell my story with as much detail from my sinful past as I used to when I first began telling my story. But it is, like many things in life, it has been a process to get there. Because earlier in my journey following Christ, it was tougher. Because sometimes I felt like the people around me are not going to understand, or they're going to see me differently. But then the more that I grew in my faith, and the more that I walked with people, the more that I began to see, oh, this is not my story. This is God's story. Just like you said, I think you said this at the beginning of our recording. And it's not, look at Rafael, but look at Jesus. It's not, look at how Rafael has changed his life. No, it's look at how God can take a life that was lost in darkness and in hopelessness, an unfulfilled life, and transform it to one that has a purpose, a destiny, hope, clarity, and filled with light. And so, to me, that's why now I'm not ashamed of telling my story. But it takes time, because there's a phrase that I heard many times, and one that I know that both Victoria and I walked, especially when you were in Christian circles, is if you knew who I was, perhaps you wouldn't like me as much. Mm-hmm. Perhaps you wouldn't accept me as you do because of the mistakes that I've made. And that's a reality. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter who you are. Mm-hmm. Every single one of us wants to be liked, wants to be accepted. Mm-hmm. We yearn for that. And so telling who you used to be that was messy and, as the Bible puts it, an enemy of God, to people that you perhaps look up to or esteem highly, and you don't really know how they're going to react, you know, it's tough, and it takes a journey. So proud of one of the guys that we was meeting with last night, and they're my first time meeting him. And when I asked him, "What's your story?" and he briefly told me his story, but he said about 7 years ago, because he was drunk, or 8 years ago, he was drunk. He, under the influence, he killed a 10-year-old young man.
Oh, man.
Exactly. I was like, oh man. But his story, then he began to talk about how God has restored him.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we asked a question in our study about how do you see God at work? And he's like, just my life is proof of that.
Yeah.
And so like when we get to a place where a story is no longer about how messed up Rafael or Tonna were, but our story becomes what a great God we serve.
Yeah.
And how loving and gracious he is and merciful, you know, to the point that we don't comprehend it, right?
Yep.
Then that's the message that I want our listeners to carry, to hear.
Have you might have answered this, but I don't think so. Have you seen God use your story?
Yeah. I think that
I'd go back to the very beginning, and God used your story right off the bat when you told Victoria.
Yeah.
He used that right there. You can already start to see the beginning of how just you being bold enough to tell her that you made a decision, because you didn't have to tell her. You know, you could have been kind of subtle and kind of trying to figure this whole thing, what's this going to look like or whatever. But no, you were so radically changed and had such a moment with the Lord that you couldn't keep quiet about it. So you started then.
Yeah.
But how else have you seen?
Yeah, and that's a great point. I've never thought about it that way. But I tend to really connect with people that have tried to experience satisfaction and fulfillment from the things that life offers or the world, and have come up really empty, and have gotten to rock bottom, and have made some mistakes. And obviously now it's like some of the guys that see me, that I talk to them, they're like, oh wow, like you look like your life is very well put together.
Right.
But my life was not always like this. And so it brings a glimmer of hope for them. And so I've seen God use my life, my story, my testimony, as you will, as a way to highlight what he is able to do when someone says, here I am. Like when I came to Jesus, I really did not know the proper, quote unquote, way to come to God.
Yep.
I felt inside of me that I was broken. I needed a new heart. My desires were messed up. My emotions were messed up. And also how I felt about people. Like that's why I feel like I ran from the call to be in ministry, specifically a pastor, because I was like, well, a pastor has to love people, and I really don't love people. Like I love the people that I love, but people are difficult to love. And it's just like, and when you read Jesus and his life and the way that he, led his life and the way that he loved people, I'm like, that's not me. And I feel like that's why God's saying, yeah, but that's why I want you. And anyway, I don't even know if I answered your question, but hopefully I did.
You did. What would you, if you could teach the younger you, like a truth about Jesus, what would you tell him?
I don't want it to sound cliche. Jesus is not a religion. Jesus,
Or a cult.
Or a cult. Yes, actually, because that's
what you thought.
Well, yeah, that when it was Catholic, it was religion, but then it became a cult when I see my family just so fanatical about the whole thing. But Jesus is not a cult. It's not a religion. He's not a box that you check in. And Jesus is not interested in what you have to offer other than just offering yourself.
I think too, even just circling back to that word cult, it's a bad word, like nothing, we don't want to have anything to do with a cult. And it is where the enemy has twisted things, because when you recognize and get a taste of who Jesus is and who he's willing to be regardless of you,
Absolutely.
despite you, and his kindness towards you, you can't, as that becomes real, you can't help but have him become everything. So it looks like a cult, because suddenly he affects how you talk. He affects what you do. He affects how you spend your money. He affects where you go and what you do. He affects your relationships, what you watch on TV, what movies you go to, all the things that he affects. It might not be, for some people, it's like, boom, right there. They gave their life to Jesus and suddenly they don't do drugs anymore. They don't cuss anymore. They don't, sleep around anymore. Suddenly there's all these big changes. I get it. Some people have that. Other people, that's just a process of beginning to understand who Jesus really is. But cult, we get that weird word because we don't know anything else in life that you would give yourself to so willingly and yet find such hope and freedom.
That's so good.
And transformation in it. And so, yeah, your parents, your family looked like lunatics to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you had a heart attack moment in the middle of a Staples Center, and you suddenly realize, oh, I'm willing to give up my girlfriend. I'm willing to give up my earrings. I'm willing to give up my identity. I'm willing to give up my friends. I mean, you and I both, we made hard decisions of walking away from friendships because we knew that it's not their fault that they're them. It's just, I'm going in a different direction now, and I'm not strong enough to make the right decisions and continue to be in this environment and be around these friendships. And so I had to take a season of life where, we're just not hanging out all the time. And then maybe seasons come along again later where I've always loved you. You are such an important friend to me, but I just had to get myself on track, and seeing that even in your own life. And that's what he becomes so worth it, that he's just worth it.
Absolutely.
He's worth it.
Absolutely.
We have a friend who says, following Jesus is just a better way.
Yeah.
And
it's so good.
If sometimes you can't articulate it until you actually submit to following Jesus, and you start to see just even over time, and you look back and you reflect and you're like, man, following Jesus is just a better way.
Yeah. Yeah. And now approaching the big birthday, I realize more and more that this life, as the Bible calls it, is nothing but a vapor. Goes so quick. And, someone can argue, well, what if there's really no eternal life for Christ? What if after this life is all over, it is truly all over? I'm fine with that, because I'm living my best life.
Yeah.
I feel fulfilled. I feel that I have purpose. I'm living in the joy that Jesus brings, the strength, the blessings, and also the struggles, right? And through those struggles, I know that He is with me, and the Holy Spirit does not leave me alone. So He's always challenging me to exhibit the fruits of the Spirit of God. And but then if you flip that question and say, but what if? What if in reality there is a God who gave His Son, who paid the price for our sin so that we can live for eternity? And that is a reality, that when this physical life is over, then your real life begins. What if that is true?
Yep.
And you live hell on earth now, and then you live hell for eternity. Like, that is a huge gamble that you're taking. And, I think that anyone listening that does not follow Jesus, that have not surrendered to Christ, that's the question that I will put forth. Like, what if the way that you have been living your life is the wrong way?
Right.
And the way that I have chosen to live mine is the right way. It's a huge gamble. So.
And that's just where being willing to share that experience and journey to discover Him is so important.
That's right.
Because, I say it all the time, it's not fair that I know Jesus in a way that other people around me don't know Him yet. And there's grander aspects to the story of who God is and just what He deserves from all of us. But in my most just human form, it's just that I have the hope of Jesus, that I have a peace that when things are happening in life that are really, really hard, there's this undercurrent of a peace that I didn't know before I knew Him. And like you talked about, there's purpose to life. Yeah. You can be working what feels like the most mundane, 9-to-5 job, but yet you can feel outside of that, there's so much purpose in it because of Him and because of what He's done in you, if you're willing to share it, and how everything's a mission filled, I could preach for half an hour about this, but let me just ask you, I think just to wrap up, I think, I'm thinking of your legacy. I'm thinking of who you would have been. Would I even know you if God had not changed your life? I adore your wife. I'm thinking, gosh, man, if that day would have turned out differently.
Yeah.
Adoring your kids and knowing that my, 3 sons have grown up close to your sons, and watching your daughter flourish and getting ready to head off to college. It's like, man, all of that would not have happened.
Yeah.
So that right there is really cool for me to think about what God has done and gifted even to our family. But just thinking of the legacy of your life and watching your children grow in their faith and figuring out who God is to them, and that they grew up in a completely different environment than you did because of what God has done.
Exactly.
So I think my final question I want to ask you is, what would you tell someone who is wrestling with, I have 2 different ways I could go. What would you tell someone who's wrestling with the shame of telling their story? And then what would you tell someone who's wrestling with, I'm just not sure who this Jesus is and the decision I want to make?
Yeah. So the first question, what would I say to someone wrestling with their story, to share the story? The things that we go through in life, and before we surrender our lives to Christ, are not for us. They're not to keep them close to the vest and to hide those things. Again, our stories are I would say, almost like one of these old school projectors, right? That you have to put the things in and you project them onto a wall or whatever. I guess that could be some new ones too.
Yeah.
But our lives are exactly that. They magnify the work of God. Like for others that are perhaps struggling in the same areas that we have struggled, and are still feeling like there is no hope, they can say, wow, if God did that for Tonna, if God did that for Rafael, maybe, perhaps maybe he can do it for me too. And I do understand why it is difficult to share your story at times. And there are things that are perhaps still secrets in your life. But God could take those things that were once shameful and highlight his goodness and his grace and mercy for other people to see. And now you become a conduit of his love. You become an instrument of reconciliation and restoration. So, and then your second question was about what would I say to someone who doesn't know about this Jesus thing, or who Jesus is. I would say that I was there. I've been there and done that, as the cliche states, and it was a journey for me. I was not willing, and I did not want to embark in this journey. God is always going to be persistent. And I will say to those individuals, if you're watching right now, that God still loves you. The Bible says that when we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. God died for the ungodly. God did not die for Rafael after I gave my life to him. He did not die for Tonna after Tonna gave her life for him. He died when we were yet sinner. What does that mean? That means that the sacrifice was already done. That means that your debt was already paid for, but your debt is still outstanding if you do not accept the payment.
Right.
So what I would say is, if you have real questions, just seek those questions out. The Bible also says that if you seek, you will find, that if you knock, the door will be open to you. And if you seek, you will totally find. And if you're seeking God through Jesus, you will find him. So I will say there's no shame in having questions. Even if you say, I don't believe. Well, the Bible tells us of a man that said exactly those words. Help my unbelief. So there is a point where we have to realize that there is more. And if you have questions, I would challenge you and encourage you to search those questions out in Christ, in Jesus, just like I did. My salvation, as I said, my surrender to Jesus didn't happen in someone leading me in a prayer like we many times do at the church. Yep. I put out a challenge to God. I said, if you are real, if you are truly God, like my brother and my family keep saying, change my heart. And I didn't give a whole lot of parameters. That's all I said. And then I almost lost my life. But I will say that I put a challenge to God, and God met me in that challenge. I said, okay, let me see if you're truly going to be a man of your word. And that's why I serve him now.
I'm thinking, I just don't want to ignore a moment. So I just want to make sure I say it just in case. Sometimes we can pray prayers like that say, like kind of prove it, God, whatever. And then we proceed to go, nope, that's not him. Nope, that's not him. And I'm thinking about that story. I don't exactly know how it goes, but it's like there's a flood and the people are up on the roof.
Oh, yeah. You're like,
God, please save us from the flood. And a helicopter comes by. And they're like, no, God's going to save us from the flood. And then a boat comes by in the water or something. And God's like, dude,
I sent you. I sent you rescue. Yeah.
Yeah, I sent you rescue, but you just kept, nope, that's not him. So just even in that prayer, being aware.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be as profound as feeling like you're having a heart attack.
Right. And and many times it's not like that.
Most of the time,
like what I said, I've never had an experience like that in my walk with Jesus now over 2 decades. And that's a great point. And I will say this. If you're truly seeing God, I really want to know if God is real. Just speak it out and say, I want to see if you're real. Show me that you're real in whatever way. And I trust that God is going to show up in a way that is going to be undeniable for you that you're going to know how in the world did this happen. Because I have had other circumstances where I've seen the hand of God in my life that I'm like, if God didn't meet me there, I would not be here. Anyway.
And sometimes it's like God showing himself is you just see things different. Like it's like you just saw it on the big screen of a movie.
Yeah.
Like you look at your baby sleeping and for the first time ever, you actually pay attention to the breath in their lungs. And somehow that makes the thought of like, there must be a God.
Yeah.
If she breathes like that. There's moments like that happen where it's just that you see things a little bit differently than you saw them before. Well, we could go on and on. You're my friend. We talk all the time. I love thinking about what God has done in your life, and I so appreciate you giving us the time to tell me your story and to be our first one. And listeners, I hope you are just encouraged that God is a really big God, and he's in all the little details. So thank you for being with us, and we'll chat again next time.
All right. Goodbye.